just can't afford to transport all these people waiting at the airport. Well, that certainly cleared the crowd. Get off my lawn! Transport Tycoon is the best business simulation game ever created. No, seriously, that's not hyperbole or some silly nostalgia-blinded statement to lead off a video. Feel free to look up business simulation game on Wikipedia if you don't believe me. You actually get a picture of a version of Transport Tycoon at the top of the article. So right off the bat, we can answer the question I usually reserve for the end of my videos. Yes, this obviously holds up. I guess that kind of ruins the suspense. The bigger question is, how has a 90s DOS game programmed by one guy managed to remain king of the hill for what is now over a quarter of a century? To answer that, we go back to the heady days of 1983, where a young Chris Sawyer has entered the games industry, writing in Z80 machine code on a Mematech MTX home computer before switching to an Amstrad CPC. Those words might mean something to older viewers. My first computer was an Amstrad CPC. They were neat. Thanks, Dad. Companies would throw the code of their games at Sawyer and he would come back with a seamless conversion to PC using assembly language that somehow ran better than the original. The most famous of these early titles was a contract from Telecom Soft, where he was tasked with porting the massively popular space trading game Elite onto PC, making the game I'm featuring today the fourth most popular title he was involved in. Sawyer garnered a reputation of being a reclusive mad genius who converted code using a combination of deft macros and razor-sharp skills. Now that he had some money and the inclination, he decided to combine his love of tycoon sims and numbers with his programming prowess in order to create an original game. An expanded take on the classic Railroad Tycoon but with an isometric bent. Or to paraphrase his colleagues, that weird numbers game with the trains. Transport Tycoon was released in the middle of 1994 and was a smash hit, compared favourably with the likes of Civilization and SimCity 2000 by journalists. So Sawyer went and developed a deluxe edition the following year with additional environments and an improved user interface among other tweaks and enhancements. Chris then became obsessed with researching roller coasters, so he made another brilliant game as an excuse to do so, and called it Roller Coaster Tycoon. Unfortunately for transportation enthusiasts, Sawyer ended up really liking roller coasters, and developed an even better sequel, proving twice over that he wasn't a one-hit wonder. The series sold millions, and its success pushed back the creation of a sequel to Transport Tycoon. And it wasn't like this angered an obscure group of train boffins that nobody cared about. There was a large crowd clamouring for his next visionary transportation title. As a result, the original game survived on decade-long dedicated community patches. TTD patch by Joseph Drexler appeared a year or two after the deluxe edition's release, adding new graphics, vehicles and industries, but ultimately the changes were still limited in scope by the original game's coding. These patches ran for a staggering 14 years, further highlighting the dedication behind the game's enthusiasts. One of these enthusiasts took it a step further, and in 2002 a young software engineer from Sweden called Ludwig Strigius decided to remake Transport Tycoon so that it would run on multiple operating systems, and natively implement the enhanced gameplay features that community patches couldn't. Ordinarily, a one-man effort to recreate a game in open source is doomed to failure, but this was no ordinary man. Coincidence time! Ludwig was the inventor of Scum VM, featured in my previous video for Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. He also happened to make uTorrent, the biggest torrent client in the Western world, and he was one of the engineers behind Spotify. I think it's some kind of music streaming program. It would be fair to say that this puts him in the upper percentile of coding geniuses. Fortunately, he used his powers for good and didn't enslave us all. OpenTTD was born, and everyone loved it. A modern, cross-platform, open-source recreation of a classic title, with widescreen support and all the little improvements and customization options that transportation enthusiasts craved. It's also built to use the original files from the old game for sake of authenticity, though there are innumerable community-created customization options as far as the eye can see, so the originals are no longer essential, unless you adore the original design and music like me and insist you try it first, which I do. Transport Tycoon is a game of supply and demand. Each map contains towns, forests, farms, mines and oil wells, or rigs if you have water enabled. Each of these industrial hubs produces resources. Your task as a budding transport magnate is to send them to mills, factories, power stations, and refineries. While it sounds convoluted to begin with, it's possible to ignore industries and focus entirely on sending passengers and mail from town to town instead on a first playthrough, or corner the market in one resource for no apparent reason. You build roads, rails, airports, or docks and populate them with vehicles, choosing whether to work within your budget or to take an enormous loan from the bank, safe in the knowledge that you have the key to generating pure profit and you're not heading off a cliff into financial ruin. For a certain type of mind, Transport Tycoon is more an addiction than a game, with each map lasting 22 real-time hours. The pixelated graphics serve their role as pieces in an intriguing battle of economics, backed by a soundtrack featuring an impeccable blend of blues and jazz originals, drawing more than a little inspiration from jazz great Herbie Hancock. Throw it all together with the aforementioned open source re-implementation and the ability to upgrade graphics and sound to a stupid degree, and the result is a strategic game with the longevity of chess. You know, that game I said didn't hold up in an earlier video. In the top left hand corner you're able to pause the game or fast forward it. Next to that you can tweak a boat load, or train load, or lorry load, or plane load of game options and settings until you're happy. There's your typical save and load, and you can also abandon the game from here if you're being hammered or want to stop for some other inexplicable reason, as opposed to leaving it on as a background process at all times. The map function gives you the layout of the land with the option to set specific overlays so that you can find things and travel to them easily. The town directory gives you a list of all the cities and towns that will grow in population over the years. If you want to transport passengers, then the bigger the better, shockingly. Subsidies are offered to encourage growth of towns and industries, and are worth picking up for a boost in profit for a year. Much like the town directory, there's also a station directory. The coins next to it display your finances and give you the option to loan or repay money. The face allows you to alter your appearance to something suitably badass. You can change your name and company colour and build a headquarters too. Graphs are available to show you operating profit, and the cup next to it shows the leaderboard. There's a handy list of industries and a list of every vehicle you or your opponent owns in the game, including how profitable they are. So if you're a fan of lists, this game really is for you. You can zoom in and out with the magnification buttons, but they're largely redundant as the scroll wheel now does this by default. Then there's the construction buttons, which you will be using a lot. Railways come first, allowing you to lay track, demolish things in your way, build train depots and stations, construct signalling lights, and build bridges and tunnels to get over and under things. Roads are exactly the same, minus signals, and with 2 depot types instead of stations. Water is even simpler, and air is the easiest and most expensive, consisting of just airports and helipads. You can lower and raise the landscape at great personal cost, as well as planting trees and signposts. The game also has a jukebox system, and you can replay any of the newspaper announcements that pop up from time to time. At the bottom is the date, a scrolling news alert system, and your money. The great thing about this interface is that you can click on almost anything and get further information, or in the case of vehicles, a nice little camera view of what they're up to. For more information and an in-depth discussion on how to play, go watch the quick start tutorial by Master Hellish. And no, you can't just go around demolishing everything like a psychopathic monster. If another company owns something, then tough luck. Likewise with towns, who will limit your construction and demolition efforts if it's not in their best interests. The steady and inexorable rise of my transportation empire became addictive and consumed my life for hours at a time, as it grew increasingly difficult to manage as I spread out over the entire map like a virus, sucking the life and resources and profit out of the poor, unsuspecting passengers and industries. I made my start in coal, choosing to pay off my loan and work on a shoestring budget for my first few years until the arrival of computer opponents. I then branched out into passengers on a quaint little island before joining it to the mainland, a mistake that my rivals capitalised on until I unsportingly destroyed the bridge I had built to the mainland. I was soon outmatched by the more modern AI, and chose to move into air transport to amass enough money to start buying up my competition. You can't do that by default, and it's considered a bit of a cheat, but you need a lot of cash in the first place, and mergers are a thing that happens, right? Well, by the 80s I had spread out across the whole map, and was beginning to regret my decision. All challenge had been sucked out of the game by my enabling takeovers, so I started afresh with a new game, one that definitely won't be my last. In 2004, Chris finally got the old band back together to release Chris Sawyer's Locomotion, a title reminiscent of a certain Sid Meier, and one which served as a spiritual successor to the original transportation game. The only problem is that it's just not as good. While certain systems that Sawyer implemented were improvements, Locomotion couldn't live up to its predecessor. It was also Sawyer's last original title, as he went on to pursue other ambitions, having made his millions. Ambitions pursued, he returned to the computing world in 2013 with a remake of Transport Tycoon for mobile devices, initially funding another development team through his holding company before rolling up his sleeves and overseeing the design and debugging himself. The result was a strange hybrid of Locomotion and Transport Tycoon that feels more like the former and remains the only way to buy this game. He did the same with Roller Coaster Tycoon, and the Originate team brought that one to PC with mixed responses, proving that Sawyer's original one-man design philosophy was just as important as his ideas. This game has been constantly installed on my machines in some form or another for 25 years now, and I suspect it will be for decades to come. There's something magical and engrossing about the design that has never been bettered despite attempts by games like Locomotion, Cities in Motion, Rise of Industry, Transport Fever 2, oh, and Simutrans. Anyone who played with trains as a child should give the open source version of this game a try. People who like strategy and city building games should find plenty to love here too. The original Transport Tycoon may have been abandoned, but OpenTTD will be with us forever, and it will be free forever too. Now let's all make trains, not war. Stay away from my island, or I'll destroy your company! I appreciate that you're admiring my company headquarters with its picketed fence, but if you build a single track piece in my town, I'll demand that you get off my lawn!